everybody. Welcome to Popular Unknown Paintball Live. I think I did the wrong introduction on that, but it's been a while and I'm just still working out all the kinks. As you can see, I haven't filled out my, I haven't fixed up my wall of pain or shame or trophy wall, whatever. But I mean, I've still got the shocker. I guess I should have gone the other way. But anyway, regardless. All right. So I have an amazing guest tonight. I've already started laughing so hard in the pre-show that my face hurts. If you have the opportunity, reach out, tell people you want to catch this episode. And I'm not saying that just because I want to say that. I'm already having so much fun and I can't wait to bring them on. Before I do, I just want to give a quick shout out to a few people. By the way, I got Hilmer Paul saying hello. So, hey, I'm doing great and I'm going to be doing better as soon as I get my guest on. So let me get through this and then let's roll. And yeah. All right. So I didn't mention any sponsors last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, because my internet was down last week. But I don't officially have any sponsors of the show at this time. That being said, I do want to give some shout outs because I personally support them more than you know. First and foremost, John Amadea and Paintball.media. Can't say enough great things about that. And it's a free magazine. So if you can, go to Paintball.media and check it out. Second of all, Tank Paintball down in Houston and Jelly Ball. Can't say enough things about Tank down there. Love that guy, love his stuff, and he's always been a big supporter of my show. So I will always be a big supporter of him. Ultra Silk, Caesar, I still love your stuff. And who am I forgetting? Oh yeah, Steve of Transfuse. Haven't talked to you in a while, Steve, but know that I absolutely love your stuff. Last but not least, I've got Fred busting my chops, and I'm only at 2 minutes and 23 seconds as opposed to his 20-minute monologues. So, yeah, Fred, nice try, but fail. Anyway, all right. So, my guest tonight is Forrest Hatcher. He is Paintball Hall of Famer. He has multiple paintball. I'm so excited, and we've been talking so much before. My brain's already scrambled. He's got patents. He's been there, done that is the best way to describe it. But let's stop talking about him and let's him start talking about himself. Hey, Forrest, how you doing?
Hey, hi, Steve. It's great to be with you. I can't talk about myself enough.
I've noticed that, and your hair, because it's perfect now.
Yeah, that's what my wife Tracy tells me anyway. So it's like, I'd be more than glad to hear from, any dissaddled, fans to that regard as well in her support. But in all fairness, in this case, it's not all about me. It's really all about paintball. So let's talk some paintball.
Absolutely. All right. So first and foremost, when did you start playing?
Technically, the winter of 1984, in the winter, and
right.
When I say local field, the closest local field was over 2 hours away in Massachusetts. I was living in Maine, and I just got the living daylights. I had a rental PGP, and paint was $1.50 or a tube, and it was whatever, 50 cents for a buck for a 12 gram, and I got the living daylights shot out of me by somebody that probably didn't have equipment that was much above a PGP. But anyway, I just thought that was okay, and I literally they played that particular field played every 2 weeks in the wintertime, and I came back for punishment every 2 weeks until I connected with Gramps. And so the history over the years, virtually from day one, because I raced motocross for almost 10 years. I raced cars for a lot of years.
Oh, nice. I didn't know you raced cars. That's awesome.
You haven't seen the Lola T590? We used to have it in our booth. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we had it in our booth at the indoor We had it in our booth. Actually, Fred, you're without and Fred probably did about a 20-minute intro from uh, the Lola at the in Nashville, but had Tom crawl in, had Bud crawl in, and whatnot into the Lola T590, which is black with the Armson green, Armson neon green, Team Armson and whatnot.
Right.
It's the so I was always fascinated with kind of the sport itself that I was involved with, but also the technological aspects of how I could make myself better, and then how I could make my equipment better.
Right. And
And
you did play tournaments, correct?
well, the thing is that from that one field in Massachusetts sprung the
What
Grim
was it
Reaper.
called, by the way?
I don't think anybody knew. It was Joe Arsenal was the owner of the field, and there were a bunch of amazing players. Jeff Brooks was probably the first guy that ever shot my toe when it was like peeking out from a place that nobody should have been able to shoot it with his KP. But so we were very everybody was loosely, very loosely connected. And then there were probably Ludlow Berkeley and Sean, I think Matthews, Kevin Leavenworth. So we were the core group of what became the Grim Reapers, and then
Nice.
yeah, and things evolved into kind of like New England Reapers, and then eventually, after I had actually left, or while I was on my way to South Africa, was a connection of a couple of different teams that formed the New England Express, if you will. And I was literally there from probably day one for Rainey and Juvie at Paintball News. When you talk about doing paste up, we're talking about literally. I was probably the editor, but
Right.
my grammar was actually pretty decent. So we literally were doing paste up. That was physical paste up of like cut and paste
Right.
onto a sheet, and then that was how Paintball News was originally created. And they were about an hour and a half away. So Rainey, of course, and Juvie were like amazing, amazing.
They
You know,
really are. I don't know them personally. I've talked to Rainey a few times, and he is amazing. But I don't know his wife, but I've heard nothing but great things.
yeah, and you will never hear anything but great things. So, so many of these things actually kind of, intertwined, in the early days, because those were the very early days, of course, of paintball, and not just really the commercialization of paintball per se, but the actual love of the sport and the promotion of the game, if you will, where there were a lot of us that had more interest in promoting the sport and just playing and making things happen. So there were a core group of us that played literally every week, sometimes two, Friday and it was Saturday and Sunday. I had a 2.5 hour drive, first there, last to leave, and then we finally settled on Tom Cook's field in Ware, New Hampshire, which is of course still operating. And that was about a 3 hour drive.
Do you know
And
what? Do you know what Tom Cook's field is by any chance?
NSG,
Pardon?
NSG.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, I mean, and that was in Tom, and Tom eventually moved to Florida and came to. Tom spent his his second honeymoon, I guess, with my wife Tracy and I in Flagler Beach, Florida.
Right.
If you will. So, in any case, I mean, the connections in paintball that we've all made, and I know yourself included, are just absolutely amazing, and things that just a bond that people really just don't fully, you know,
No.
you can't recreate it. It's not artificial. It's not something that you'll ever experience other than if you're there, in the moment, and that happens. But we formed a core group of 5 players, and this was 85 ish,
Right.
and we were, I mean, we were virtually unstoppable. It was just one of those things that was almost embarrassing. to have five players march downfield, shoot everybody. As fast as we could get.
So not sorry.
Sorry, but I mean, as fast as we could, as literally as fast as we could get from one end of the field to the other. Sometimes like 30, 40 seconds to get from one end of the field to the other. Before grabbing the flag, and then of course, the days of the 15-man tournaments were just amazing. 12 grams and.
Oh, I know. I started in '89, but because I was in Canada, everything was a little bit a year to two behind. So I started out with a Brass Eagle Nightmare with 12 grams. That was my first paintball gun.
My first was my first was actually a Nightmare with California Consignaire, and I will tell you this, my phone bill with Gramps exceeded the price of what I paid for that Ninja Nightmare. And Gramps was so gracious. We would talk sometimes 2, 3 hours at a time and it was on my dime, but it was on
Right.
his time. So I'm sure like whatever I was paying, 25 cents, a minute was,
Right.
nothing compared to what his time was worth. But we spent hours and hours and hours and hours, on the phone and formed an amazing, relationship.
And just to clarify, you're talking about Gramps of Gramps and Grizzly fame,
No,
correct?
there's only one Gramps.
Well, I only bring it up because now that this is out there on YouTube, people are gonna be able to find it for years to come. And so every now and then, I'm just gonna inject a little bit of detail so people can research later. I forget what Gramps' name is, though. I just know him as Gramps and Grizzly.
The thing is, I'd probably be hard pressed as well. But his son Mike, who is Grizzly,
Right.
um, and
Such a cool guy. Him I've chatted to with.
yeah. Well, the thing is, and to jump ahead a little bit, but my first experience with him was not.
Yeah, but that's paintball.
No, well,
A lot of times we don't like each other until we've locked horns a few
no,
times.
no.
Like, all
Well,
right, you can keep up.
so, but no, but here's kind of and it's kind of it's a story, if you
Right.
will.
Go
So
for it.
there was a photographer in California who really wanted to be, like the paintball photographer, if you will. So I sent him one of our Armson on-off push. We developed a push very early on. Would have been 90, even 90, as early as 91 ish, if you will. But a on-off push CO2 valve.
The inline on off switch.
It's actually like, part of a bottle valve. So
Right.
the thing is that I sent it to him for photos only. It was not Loctited on, and it was for photos only. And so he ended up giving it to Grizzly Mike, so I get a call from like, everything's fine. I get a call from Michael like, I your valve, and like it just like I unscrewed it from the, like it just like everything blew apart, and I'm like, and it's like, and I'm like, whoa, Mike. It's like, dude, I sent that out to, and it was I forget the photographer's name, but
It's all right.
Mike and I both knew. Well, that was like in 1991. I don't remember what color my shoes were then. Probably anyway, same as they are now. In any case, so it was he's like, oh dear Lord. So that thing went like, the bottle went like sailing past my head and like just grazed my ear, banged off the wall, sort of thing. And I'm like, no. That went to, it was only supposed to take photos of it. It wasn't Loctited in. So we actually ended up having a really good laugh about it. And that was actually the first time that I had spoken to Mike, to Grizzly, and it ended up being a good laugh. But it was just one of those things that it was like, he was so mad at me when he called, and I just like, that was for like photo only, and you weren't even supposed to have it. So that was my first introduction with him, and we've been like close, fast friends, since then, which is great because he's amazing. But Gramps was just an incredible guy that was so totally dedicated to the sport and added so much to it. So he was a big part of my early experience with paintball. Now, uh, so with our five, basically what we started out as our 5-man core of
I'm just going to interrupt for just one quick second. For those people that aren't familiar with Gramps and Grizzly, they're most famous for
constant,
bringing out
constant.
constant air, which is liquid CO2 bottles attached to paintball
Yeah,
markers.
yeah, I mean, and initially it was literally like California
Right.
constant air, and then of course later on we had, if you wanted your VM68, for example, anything that wanted a lot of let's say torque, so to speak, you went with a
Yeah, I
ball.
had a PMI 3, serial number 498. Hated that thing. Hated it with a passion.
So some of our guys here in New Hampshire, we had some. Well, I'm in Maine, but we had some of our teammates or people that we played with that were really. I mean, everybody back then was just doing anything innovative that they could to
Right.
make things work, and it was the Wild West, but it was actually very well controlled overall. So we had one of our airsmiths, Dale, and I can't remember his last name for the sake of me, but he did some great stuff. But he added the siphon bottle to the VM arsenal, if you will, and basically with a VM, you could play at that point. You could play down to like, I don't know, 10 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, you could literally play well below freezing. But of course, it was like a huge. If you had, I mean, we didn't have the kind of cameras that we have
Yeah.
now that you can just bolt on anything. But you would have like a burst of like just snowflakes out of the end of the barrel. That
Oh no. I remember that. I had borrowed one of the Tipmans. Oh, what were they called?
oh
Not
yeah, yeah, actually, Denny came out with like probably the first. Denny came out with the first 20-ounce siphon tanks. Yeah,
yeah. I'm trying to remember what it's not the SL68 because that's the pump. Um
68,
trying to pardon?
68 special.
I think that's it.
68 special. They only built like 30. They built about 35, just under 35,000 of the 68 specials in like 1990, 1991. And we had huge demand for. We built a couple of valve modifications and then our barrels for them and whatnot. And the second they announced that they were no longer going to build them, the sales of any accessories for them went to like zero, which is so weird because there were still a bunch of them out in the wild. But the 68 specials were one of the first barrels that we actually built built Armson barrels for. And the backstory on that is that when I moved to South Africa in 1989, because of Aaron Carter. Now, like I say, I mean, if Aaron hadn't introduced me to the Armson site, I I don't know that I would have actually ever had a real connection to Armson because I
All
went.
right, so I'm gonna interrupt you for just a
To,
second. You
yeah,
said that as I said, that was in our pre-talk. That's why I kept
oh,
cutting you off. So
yeah.
tell them about how Aaron gave you your first sight.
Well, so Aaron had a pro dot. Now, of course, I'd seen the ads because I, and Al Eba, Randy Camilla, just I mean, the number of just unbelievably amazing people that that many of us knew, some of us knew, many of us knew well, over the course of many years, but especially early on. But Al had a deal with APG, Action Pursuit Games, where he ran like 200 pages of ads. No, I think he may have run as many as like 4 pages, but the Armson site was one of them, for example. So it always had kind of like piqued my interest. And then I connected with Aaron at, I think, like I said, the '87 skirmish games in New York, and Aaron had about a 3-inch barrel pistol, if you will,
Right?
and he said, check this out. And so paintball and physics for some reason don't kind of seem to always connect the way that you would
No,
expect.
because we're gonna talk about your internally rifled barrels eventually. We're gonna get to there, and I got questions and I got comments, but continue on with the site.
I'm classically trained in the physical sciences. I have degrees in marine biology, oceanography, and on the scientific side. So Aaron had about a 3-inch barrel pistol, and he had some garbage cans set up that were hanging from the limbs of whatever trees were like
Sure.
4th booth sort of thing. Tom Kay was there with his Panther, which was the very limited. I'm not even sure if there was more than one not even sure if there was more than one built. This was the kind of the precursor, if you will, of the. This was
The pre-search to the automag.
yeah.
I
So
gotta look that up. I'm dying to see what it's like. I may have to just call Tom and say, "Hey, send me a
yeah,
picture. I want to see this."
Tom still physically has, and keep in mind that I spent a ton of time with Tom, who's a most gracious host, as was everyone at Airgun. But I spent a ton of time, at Airgun between the micromag, the warp feeds. I mean, all kind, and also, I mean, we were involved with them with Perfect Circle and the development of the FN3L3 less lethal launcher, if you will, back in the '90s. So I mean, there's a long history, very involved and quite elaborate, if you will. So Aaron has this like 3-inch barrel pistol that he's like, here, just check this out. Shoot a garbage can lid, and the thing lit up like like a bell. It was like Hunchback of Notre Dame. It was like bang. It was like, are you kidding me? It's like, yeah. And he put over a chrono at like 300 feet per second, but the thing the thing rang. I mean, the thing rang bells. So there was something obviously going on, and there's a lot of controversy over. A lot of tons and tons and tons of controversy over this whole subject of what happens in the barrel, once the paintball leaves the barrel, and it's just pretty complicated. So I mean, when I say, and a lot of it uh, potentially a lot of it actually it really does defy physics, or seems to anyway. I'm sure there's some logical
All
explanation
right,
out
so I'm gonna for just a
there.
quick second. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the point sites that Forrest is talking about, they are this unique red dot site, for lack of a better word. They have no batteries. They work on kind of like a fiber optics. The light comes in, but they're solid. So you could put them on anything, and when you look at it, it you can't see through it, but you see this red dot, and it gives you the ability to move it, sight it, whatever. So it works with your gun, but you can't see it. As Sean Halpin just said, he said reflex sight. Thank you. I forgot exactly what the name of the Armson site was, or Pro Dot, or I
Well,
I
that
don't remember.
when I moved back from Salta, it was originally developed as a 22 site with a very, 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 I mean, unbelievably small aperture in the reticle.
Right.
Made it appropriate for 22s, if you will, and the ones that were developed, by and then later developed as they are now, have a larger aperture, which makes a bigger dot and is more appropriate for rapid acquisition and the size of the target that you'd
Right.
use range for paintball. So
I just thought they were super neat because what you could do is when the Angels came out, the Angels had the center stack,
yeah,
like the center feed, and you'd put the sight behind the feed, and it was that makes no sense to me whatsoever. But my God, does it work
defied
good?
logic, absolutely defied logic, but still works. So
Yep.
basically, on any vertical feed marker, And these things were derived from, well, you can go back in history and of the reflex site, if you will, that was so well, referenced. And but the thing is, the founding partner of Armson was connected with Normark in the UK, and Vernon.
The people that make knives and stuff, Normark, like
No, actually, Normark was actually, that's a good question, but there are so many names that are like, throw a name out there, and it's like, just if it sounds familiar, then it's got, there are 10 companies that run something under that. But Normark actually built aircraft, and they became involved in, sorry,
I just popping that up so that I share
yeah.
cross-platform. You don't actually have to read it.
Yeah, so I mean, Sean. Yeah, I mean, well, no, I mean, Sean's great. I mean,
Oh, he's an amazing guy.
yeah, we know Sean for a long time. So the thing is, I'm sorry, I just saw that when it popped up. So the thing is that the founding partner of Armson, uh, Vernon Milligan, actually was involved with Normark, and they were strictly like, they were literally an aircraft manufacturer. They built aircraft like,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they built aircraft, and somehow somebody, they got bored, maybe a little bit, which is what happened with Armson when it came to paintball. But I digress. The Normark actually decided somehow that they wanted to be involved with sighting systems, and Normark used tritium in all of their gauges and dials, if you will, of their for their aircraft.
Right.
So they decided that, well, let's just do something with a so who whispered in their ear, I don't know, but Vernon, the founding partner of Armson, and this guy from Sweden were kind of engaged by Normark to work on the sighting systems, and they developed the single point, which was the most famously known for the Sante raid, and they it was very crudely. They basically just had a fiber optic. They drilled the fiber optic and stuffed tritium into it to get the low light capability, which is one of the reasons why it was actually chosen for that mission. And that mission is unbelievably, complicated.
Right.
Unreal. So in any case, and there's a lot of backstory with that. At some point, I mean, Armalite became involved. They wanted to, they were a distributor, and eventually Normark said, we build aircraft. We really don't do sites, and yeah, so they sent Vernon with all blessings off to South Africa, which is where where he wanted to go. They gave him a bunch of different things: the dye powder that they use for the fiber optic, a bunch of a bunch of just little things, and sent him off. He already had the design for the OEG, which is a much improved version of the single point. So when he hit South Africa, he hit the ground running, and the OEG was in production within months of him reaching South Africa, and was very rapidly adopted by the South African Defense Force. And he immediately received an order for like 5,000 sites from the South African Air Force, which was like
Nice.
huge. I mean, if you can imagine, as a brand new business, to have like this massive order. So anyway, that got that whole ball rolling very early. That was 1978. So, moving forward to my experience, and time spent with Aaron. Aaron's like, hey, you got to see this, and I'm like, yeah, well, I see the ads, and I didn't know Al Eva at the time, and since then we'd become very good friends. We stayed in his home. He and his wife Patty, very gracious hosts. So my wife Tracy and I would stay with them sometimes when we were in California.
Right.
Tracy's brother lived, fairly nearby, so we would, we had, kind of some options, but just, amazing, amazing, amazing people. And just one other amazing person or people, if you will, and a lot of it was family. So, if
Well, that's how paintball works. Even if you're not family, it still feels like family.
well, that was the early paintball was all about all about family, and the thing is that Teresa and I worked together in the business for 22 years. I started South African Survival Game Supplies in 1989,
Right.
and so this is kind of my introduction to Armson, if you will. So
Okay.
this kind of back to the beginning, if you will. So and Frank, thank you for that, brother. We miss you a lot, a lot.
Frank's awesome, isn't he?
Now, the
Did
thing,
you know? Did you? I'm just going to change this for just a quick second.
yeah.
Did you know that between his Dilly Dilly donuts and his new ice cone thing, he's actually going on like this full-fledged diet, and he's tormenting me with all this great food
Oh, the
about losing weight, and yet he's still selling Dilly Dilly donuts and liquid sugar ice cones.
Well, the thing is, the Dilly Dilly Donuts are a great commercial, adventure, but the Twisted, I'm not sure what it's called, Twisted Foods or whatever it is that he's doing for himself. So, I mean, Frank's going to keep himself in shape, man. I mean, it's like
Hey, I know, I get it. I just want
none
to
of,
slap him.
none of us are getting any younger. So the thing is,
Exactly.
it's like we got to keep ourselves in shape so that we can make sure that we sugarize.
You're just trying to maintain your hair. That's just
Yeah, I know the hair thing. It's a family deal. It's just one of those things, but it's not a problem. But yeah, no, Frank, love your brother. It's like and just our Florida family is just so unbelievably amazing.
right.
So in 1989, I was having cocktails at a restaurant outdoor restaurant in California. Table of South African au pairs next to us. Happened to
I don't
be
know what an au pair is.
au pair. It's something French that rhymes with "I'm going to take care of your children, and you'd best hope for the best." If you will. So a lot of au pairs, a lot of au pairs basically are traditionally French or European or whatnot, and they're commonly hired as longtime base longtime. Uh, longer term live-in, if you will. So they typically need to come in on some sort of a visa from wherever it is, the UK, South Africa, etc., France, and it gives them a chance to experience the culture of.
Are we just using a fancy word for nanny?
Yeah, I mean it's a nanny, but it's a nanny with a visa. So they're limited in their they're kind of they're more limited in regards to permanent employment. They're more temporary employment typically, but yeah, they're a nanny, and
Okay.
so what it does is it gives
I'm with you. I just had to get
it gives
international nanny.
Yeah, so right, so it gives nannies the opportunity to
Yeah,
go to different countries and
got
actually
it.
do the nanny thing. So anyway, next thing I know, I'm like, I think I must have kind of like nodded off, sitting at the table having a cocktail. Next thing I knew, I was wheels down in Johannesburg. So I don't know, man.
Sounds like a bachelor party.
Yeah, well, things exactly. So things happen. It just wasn't Las Vegas. So I ended up forming South African Survival Game Supplies, and we were importing Bullseye. So George in New York from Bullseye was one of the major suppliers in the Northeast, and of course, it's one of those deals where paint was fairly imperfect in those
Yeah,
days.
and no offense to Bullseye, but what little Bullseye I tried, fairly imperfect is very gracious.
Yeah, well, so that's kind of how I am. Any case, but that George tightened things up, if you will. I mean, the other alternative was 3,000 round boxes So I mean, but nobody's basically at that point in time, nobody distributed to anybody other than to Fields. So Aldo was one of the first people to ship paint from
Aldo Perone.
yeah, from Mississauga. So
Yep.
he'd ship paint from Mississauga.
That
Uh,
was Zap, right?
it was
Not Zap yet.
yeah, probably pre-Zap. So the thing is that it was 3,000 rounds all in one box. And the first thing you did when you opened it was you already had a towel, or more than one towel laid out on the floor, and you had 3,000 rounds in one box in a plastic, bag that had
You had to
made the trip from Mississauga through wherever it came through to your location, and you basically dumped the whole box of paint onto and you had a little bit of a paintball massage party, getting all of whatever broke, broke,
I
and
remember.
yep. And so you basically do the old paintball massage on on the towel on the living room floor, depending on yeah,
Yep.
how
And for those who don't understand, when the paintballs break, if just in case
even
anybody isn't,
even if they see, yeah.
you've got to roll them on a towel to get any loose paint off. Otherwise, it sticks in the gun. So you got to not dry it because it still has to have a little bit of the oil just to make it. But yeah,
It has to be plump and juicy, yet dry to the touch. We have
e-
just a little bit of juicy,
like
nice
a grape.
and
And if we're talking about bullseye paint, it is about shaped like a grape too.
so a football is a football, okay? It still flies through the air. It's won many, many,
So
many.
that's why you had developed a rifled barrel, because the round was wouldn't just sort of.
So a football has won many, many, many championships. However, it is shaped like a football, okay? So it flies through the air with the greatest of ease, and the flying young men in their flying trapeze. So the one of the so here I am, South African survival game supplies. I was bringing in, Bullseye, which was virtually there was one guy that controlled virtually all of paintball in South Africa. I will say that he actually drove a Rolls Royce, and literally, and the thing was that people would try to bring in, people would try to, good night, Connor. People would try to, uh, people would try to bring in, paint. And what he would do is at that point, he would um, lower the price to the point where they would lose money and they would just dump whatever paint they brought in just in an attempt to, like, get out, if you will. And then the price would go back up. So at the time, the equivalent was about 50 cents per round. So if you went to a field, you're paying about a dollar, the equivalent of a dollar a round. Let me put it this way: you could buy a good South African brewed beer for a dollar, or you could buy like a paintball for a dollar. So there we go. And and so he kept playing that game. People would try to, like, lower the price of paint, and he would just stomp them. I brought paint in. I stabilized the price of paint in South Africa at the local pricing. Keep in mind it's in rands, but the equivalent, let's say, of 25 cents a round. And
Right.
I never budged from that. So it went to like fields at 25 cents a round. The players, the fields paid 50 cents a round for it. Or charged 50 cents a round. I charged them 25 cents, never budged from my price of 20 wholesale price of 25 cents. And that seems like a lot, but if you put it into, hey, Robert, if you put it into, the local currency, if you will, it was far below the current pricing. And this guy tried to budge, couldn't budge me, could not budge. So we established a very good, base, and didn't charge when paint was scarce. We didn't charge more. I didn't charge more. I established a baseline price, and that was what it was. No profiteering. Baseline is the baseline. Players could expect to pay uh, the same price week after week after week, if you will. So that all worked, and I actually met our current partner, Melvin Van Gran, and his wife Judy, who are amazing, amazing, amazing people, who had sold a business and got into paintball, and oh, hey, there's Stephen. It's like so Stephen, at the time it was kind of tough because the people that had big money were bringing in high dollar stuff. Everybody else was like not doing much. I was actually the Brass Eagle distributor for South Africa and also the Tippmann distributor for South Africa. So we actually, with Brass Eagle, we were bringing in like the Cobras, if Cobras and King Cobras for pumps, if you will, and then the first SL68 ones, and I think even eventually the SL2s before I left, and even a few of like the like Barracudas and what have say and Jaguars or what have, but that
Those guns were wild. The Jaguars. I played with a guy. Do you remember back in the day when uh birth control pills were causing physical defects? Well, I played with a guy and I can't remember his name, but he only had 3 fingers on his left hand, and then his right hand, he only had his baby finger and his thumb, and everything else, and it was all birth
not
defect
not
caused by the by
not,
the bad
not Thorazine, but
I don't remember what it was called,
yeah,
but either way, it was
I know,
and the one arm was a bit deformed. So he loved his Jaguar. Like he kept that meticulously clean. He put one of the let's call it a rain cover made by Tasso with the yellow O-rings on it. He put one of the lovely rain covers on it, and he would be rocking around the woods holding it with his 3 fingers around the barrel and then shooting with his
that's awesome. I mean,
it was amazing. By the way, those of you who don't know, the Jaguar and the Barracuda. Jaguar was a short version. Barracuda was a very long version, and it was a double action paintball gun that was finicky at best, but he
and,
rocked that thing.
and well, don't forget the poison, as well. But
Oh,
the
I won't forget the poison, but that came after, and
yeah,
the
that,
true blowback.
that was actually not technically, I think, double action, but it
No,
was
the poison was a blowback.
blowback. Yeah,
Yeah, because Martin of the Booney Boys,
yeah.
the lot of the Booney Boys had a ton of poisons. They'd have like 3, 4 of them, and when one go down, they'd bring another, and they had some way of making them work.
I
To
did.
this day, I don't understand.
Yeah. So what I did was because they actually had an external spring.
Yes,
Okay. So what I did was I actually drilled the hammer and the rear plug, if you will, so to speak. I still have those mods. I sent them to somebody a few years ago now, as far as the specs on that, and I still actually have those parts. But I modified poisons to use Tippmann springs internally
that's cool.
rather than that, so have a compression spring rather than that expansion spring that was on the external and worked. It actually worked. Yeah, I mean, that was, my nature was to like just,
So you basically turned a poison into a Model 98.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, virtually, yep. And that was actually probably in 92, 93 when we were with,
So without saying it, you just told us that you invented the Model 98.
well, yeah, I'll never take anything away from the Timmons. Denny Senior.
No, no, I'm nothing against the Titmans. I'm just saying.
So, but I used that from I did use the 68 special. It was actually at that point in time, it was, that was 6 years. That was probably 6 years before the Model 98, but I used 68 special, if you will. So South African Survival Game Supplies, and I'm running all over Johannesburg, Greater Johannesburg, and going to sporting goods stores, gun stores, and whatnot, and giving them the option for different things that I was able to import at the time. And nobody had arms and sights. And I thought that was like really weird because being a South African product and being such a great product,
Oh, this stuff's amazing.
well, that it was, I just said, I'm like, so I would drop off like little mini catalogs, and people could, the store owners could either fill in, or orders for things that they wanted to stock, or if they had customers come in, the customers could actually special order stuff, because at the time it's like things were very hard to get. So if they wanted to order something, I would just add it to my list, and when things came in, I would drop them off at those stores, and their customers would pick them up, and everybody was happy, and we were very reliable, and that was all great. So I called Vernon, the founding partner in South Africa, in Durban, I'm sorry, and from Johannesburg, and so I'm running all over, Johannesburg, and so far I have
Hear you
not
fine,
seen.
but
Sorry, say again.
I'm sorry. I was listening to you fine, and then all of our videos dropped out for a second, and then it all came back.
Okay.
We're good now.
So good. I mean, all the gun shops and all the places that you would normally expect to see the arms and sighting systems,
Right.
particularly built in South Africa, and there were heavy import duties and all kinds of, at that time the rand was starting to go south. The rand at one point in time was like $2.50 to 1 rand, and by the time I was in South Africa, it was more like, $1 to a rand was worth less than 50 cents to the dollar, if you will. So, any case, so bottom line is, buying local when you have a currency disadvantage, and of course, I'm a first generation Canadian American, and so I over the years I've followed. The rise and decline of the currency discrepancies, if you will, in uh, Canadian versus the U.S. dollar,
Oh
and
yeah.
import duties and all that kind of stuff, and I try to really, I've always taken I love my brothers and sisters in the Great White North, or the greater whiter North than I am, if you will. So the and Sean's like,
He just wondered if
oh
paintball does
yeah,
fall under firearm laws in
yeah.
South Africa.
So Sean, the thing is, they in certain, we helped with the F stamp in Sweden, which was kind of a long story. That was part of our history with national paintball. In South Africa, there definitely were some issues with paintball and firearms. Nothing. It was still okay. Countries like Sweden, for example, had major issues. It was a matter of joules. So anything with a certain amount of impact energy was regulated as a firearm. South Africa was okay. At that point, a lot of countries were, certainly Australia, just
Yeah.
big thing. So I call the factory, and talk to Vernon, who's the founding partner, and basically picks up his own phone, because just, I mean, they were doing good business, but that was the way that it was back then. We really, just literally the first fax machine I ever saw was in South Africa, quite honestly, Vodafone, and so we really, everything was still done by phone. So I'm like, well, Vernon, what's, good to meet you. Um, uh, so I'm up here in every sporting goods store and every gun shop in Johannesburg, and I'm hitting a lot of shops, but I'm not seeing any arms and sights at all. I've been using arms and sight now for several years, love it, and I'm just not sure why they're not here. So, well, the answer is simple. If you call us and order one, at the time it was like, what it was, like 80 rand or 90 rand, and he said if you want 10, it's 80 rand. If you want 100, it's 80 rand, because all they really did was military contracts for the most part. So there was no vertical integration, there were no dealers, no distributors, nothing that actually led to the retail market whatsoever. So I remember I sold one site to a guy in Johannesburg who insisted that I get one for him, and I think I marked it up, 5 rand, which was probably about $2. And I'm like, I, I'm just, I, I'm like, I was embarrassed with the thought that I would, sell him something and he could call the factory and go like, "Oh no, you could buy it from us for like 5 grand less." And so that was probably the one site that I ever sold in South Africa, if you will, because of that. So that was something that we so I Trigicon, of course, was founded. Trigicon, being a very well known name,
Yes.
probably the largest manufacturer of sighting systems in the world at this point. And Trigicon was founded. Glenn Binden, who was quite a genius, he was an aerospace engineer, uh, immigrated from South Africa to the U.S., was involved in aerospace engineering, went to work for Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, but he was a big, big, big hunter. Still had, of course, a lot of relatives in South Africa, and visited South Africa on a hunt. Saw the Armstrong OEG red dot site. Said, "We have nothing like this anywhere in the US," bought a half dozen of them, took them back to the US when he returned, and sold them to friends, family, whatever. Bought another half dozen, bought another half dozen, started selling them at gun shows and whatnot. And then eventually, but before long, actually, be, uh, established proprietary, not a proprietary necessarily, but a exclusive contract for the
Right.
sale of sites of the OEG sites in the U.S. So Trigicon actually started as Armson Incorporated, and within a year they became Leadership Keys, and then later on, Trigicon. The brilliant thing that they did was to actually apply for the tritium license, which had never been issued by the NRC for a Nuclear Regulatory Commission
Right.
for sighting systems. So that was the one thing that he really, really did right. First 4 or 5 years that they existed, they sold no products other than the Armson site, Armson OEGs, but they had that tritium license that nobody else in the country had, which allowed them to develop the handgun sights that we know now, the ACOG, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and whatnot. So that was kind of that history. But in speaking with Vernon, he said, well, the Trigicon has just re-upped their contract. He said, "I wish you'd caught me like a couple of months before, if you will, but because they're working on their own stuff now at this point. But that's not important." He said, "I'm really interested. I ordered a couple of Phantoms and he said, I'm looking at them right now." And he said, "I don't want to copy anything at all. I'm not interested in copying anything. I'm interested in innovating. So I would really like to build a pump gun that's Nelson based, if you will, and kind of, it's going to be kind of similar to the Nelson, but to the Phantom, if you will, but have a ton of improvements." The one thing that, the big issue with being proprietary is that nothing's interchangeable. So everything was metric. So our grips, our like valves, our, fill in the blank of anything that any Phantom owner potentially would have wanted as an upgrade or improvement, based on the Armstrong paintball rifle, was not interchangeable because it was completely proprietary, because Vernon did not want to copy. So there were a ton of really cool things. So we get the return to the U.S., and so he and I are on the phone every day, collaborating on the what was called, everything was like so simple. There was no marketing. It was called the Armstrong paintball rifle, the APR. It's like, this is exciting, woohoo! It's like, uh, so the APR. I get the first shipment of like 100. I get the first two in February of 1991, maybe, and the seals leak immediately because the seal material was suitable. It wasn't Delrin, it might have been nylon. And the first thing that happened, I was in New Hampshire at that point. First thing happened, cold weather, boom, yeah, leaking like a sieve because the material was too hard. So that was a fairly easy fix, but wasn't obvious to anybody in South Africa because the weather conditions were much warmer. So,
Are we
are we,
talking about that right there?
no, actually, we're talking about the APR one.
All right.
Right here, where Bocce, or right here. This right there is that might be the APR two. These Anything with a removable barrel would be so the APR one. The APR one was fixed barrel, and then the APR, what would have been the APR two, was actually the Assassin. But for the Assassin, which would be this is basically the Assassin here. So I said, you know, I think we need to do removable barrels. And Vernon said, no, no, no. What we're going to do is we're going to build the most accurate paintball marker on the planet, and people are going to buy that. Well, I mean, how much profit is there in, but by the time you get done, and then of course nothing works quite right. So of the first, 100 APRs that I got in, I had to go through every single one of them. Not many came back, but basically they all had to, they had hours and hours and hours. So I just said, he's like, no, 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 no. We want people to buy our paintball, marker, and this is what's going to make them buy it, because they are so accurate with our barrel. And I'm like, okay. So I took perfect APR ones, fixed barrels, and just hacksaw the barrels off, basically sent them to a local machine shop. Had one done for a non-model A, sorry, 68 special. I think one done maybe for an illustrator, and one done for, some Bushmaster, something else. And the increase in accuracy was absolutely beyond unbelievable. I mean, it was exponential. It was unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. And at the time, a lot of people believed that it actually spun. There we go. So a lot of people actually believe that it spun the ball, and even at the factory, they believe that it spun the ball.
All right. So I'm going to interrupt you for just a quick
Here we
second.
go. Here we go.
All right. So we are talking about the arms and barrels that looked like they were internally rifled, and it's
Yeah.
actually in. Now, I'm going to be honest with you because I like you and I respect you. I hated those barrels. Hated them with a passion. I grew up in a household that is familiar with firearms. My dad was a Boy Scout leader, and I spent a lot of time up in Northern Ontario with firearms. And the idea of taking a round ball that isn't perfectly round and spinning it and expecting it to fly straight, it went against everything that I knew to be true for ballistics.
Yeah.
But my best friend Sean, and I'm going to be fair here, my best friend Sean Pickard, who played with me all the time, he bought one of your arms and barrels and he put it on his autococker, and his gun shot lasers. So I respect that they work, but I will tell you,
They do not spin the ball. So if you look at the early Smart Parts ads, they actually feature slow motion photography in a print ad that supposedly shows their vented rifling, the rifling, if you will, the
yeah,
vented.
it was known as a Smart Parts rifled barrel up here. You are 100% correct. It's venting. It's not rifling, but yeah.
But it theoretically showed the ball being spun for stabilization, and stated that in the ads. And this would have been like 91, 92, where if you looked at an APG ad, it would show like a puff of smoke, and it would show the ball might be like, have like, test dummy kind of black and white,
Right.
quads, and it shows it spinning kind of thing and whatnot. The thing is that we used a very proprietary. We used H&K polygon rifling.
Okay.
The rifling is very, very deep, very, very deep. and it was misunderstood. Russell Maynard, who at the time was the editor, greatly respected editor of Action Pursuit Games at the time, said, actually, thanks, Stephen. Appreciate you, brother. It's like they uh, he said there's absolutely no way on the planet that this can possibly work. Well, the thing is that the bottom line with the barrel is that it produces the least amount of surface friction available. So you think about it, as long as you maintain enough air, so to speak, or propellant behind a barrel. And people don't understand how fast. I mean, a paintball travels down a barrel in milliseconds. I mean, it really
Yes.
does. So it's not like this big, long, protracted, like, thing going on.
Yeah.
So I never claimed that it spun the ball, ever, 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 ever. But my contention was, and has been since proven, I believe, that it maintained the least amount of surface contact with the paintball. So if you think about it, you have a perfectly honed barrel. Shiny, 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 shiny. What happens after you run paintballs down it? You get like residue from gelatin. You get a gelatin scrape. You break a ball. I mean, think about the shrapnel in the barrel itself. So now you have automatically have induced spin, even if it's just simply a matter of. I mean, think about taking a paintball. Think about taking a pencil eraser
Oh
and take
yeah.
pencil eraser against a certain smooth surface, and then running something down the thing. And keep in mind that I'm classically trained in. I mean, I'm not that well educated, but I'm classically trained in on the scientific side. So I mean, I
Yes.
understand a little bit about the
Oh no,
whole
I'm following you. I'm
research.
not telling you you're wrong. I'm learning here.
So the thing is, if you took, let's say, for example, if you took a paintball barrel and ran an eraser down one side of it, what's going to happen is the side that has the eraser, that has that higher friction element, is going to actually induce spin, because as the ball travels down the barrel, it's going to naturally slow down on that particular side, if you will, of the barrel, as it as there's more induced friction, so that will actually create spin. So between the combination of whether it's gelatin or a paintball break, I mean, any of the stuff that that happens in
Right.
even perfect paintball barrel is going to potentially induce a spin. With our barrels, basically it's like riding over. I mean, think about, I raced motocross for like 9 years. I raced cars for years and stuff. And I know all about braking over a rough surface. So if you're braking on a perfectly smooth surface, everything's like great. You've got good traction, you're braking. If you're braking, for example, over a bumpy surface, you kind of skip from one bump to the next, if you will, and you're not getting a lot of traction. Well, the barrels sort of kind of work like that, in the respect that you're only getting enough surface contact to keep the ball traveling straight down the barrel,
Right.
opposed to being involved with anything that's going to potentially create induced spin. I mean, once you break a ball in the barrel, and you got, it's wet, and it's going to be what it is. But the bottom line is, we created an environment that provided the lowest coefficient of friction in a barrel, so the balls just barely skipped over the rifle